can stay with us. Usually they will come into the city. The last 2 summers have been remote learning, but they come into the city and they usually stay on the campus of American University because it's a cheaper rate and work with us. But I really recommend this program. It is a really good program. And again, it's across the board. We don't no longer say interns, but we call them fellows. And it's not grunt work. They write papers, they meet with members of Congress, they set up meetings. And I really want to push this because not a lot of people know that we have interns. And again, it's not just for the summer, but we have one young lady who is at American, but she's doing extended study with us, so she will be in the office. We also participate in the YAB program out of the center. We're in a YAB, Young Advisory Volunteer, will spend a year with us. And so again, I really want you to keep that in mind, especially if you have young people, members of your family who are interested in public policy. Again, supervised field education. Now, these are the ways in which we do our work. And especially since everything's going digital. We have a web page that's a part of the PCUSA web page, and all of the links or anything that I talk about are on that web page, especially if there's a young person who's interested in our summer. It's still called internship, but even though we call it fellows, tell them to click on that link, all the information is there, the application, they can download all of that. And we do alerts. Do any of you get alerts? So alert is a one-page statement that we send out pertaining to some specific issue with actions that we want you to take. And usually it's just, you click on the bottom, it'll send you directly to your member of Congress. You can either forward the statement that we have written or you can write your own statement. So if you are, my email is jimmy.hawkins@pcusa.org. And I have plenty of cards if anyone wants my card. So if you will send me an email that you want to get on our distribution list, I will have you put on the distribution list. But our alerts are probably the most ongoing activity that we have. We do webinars all the time. We have 2 coming up this month. They're both international webinars. We had a group from the Philippines come and talk to us just this week, and we record all of our webinars as well. But we try to alternate them, 1 month domestic, 1 month international. But then we also get that information if you are part of our email distribution list. Facebook is probably where we get most of our social media hits. A lot of activity on Facebook. And then we have a Twitter account that we primarily use when there's some event going on. Like if I was in DC today, and if I decided to go to the January 6th rally, we would tweet then, or if I went to one of the counter rallies, we would tweet then. We don't do a lot of tweeting on a regular basis, but normally, pre-COVID, there were a lot of it. DC is the protest capital of the nation, so there's always something going on in DC, and a lot of times we get invited to speak at press conferences or rallies, things along that line. Oops. Oh, and then lastly, we have a blog. We have a wonderful blog that no one reads because who reads the blog unless you're the writer of the blog. But it's a really good blog that we have, and then we do articles for Presbyterians Today, survey, things on that line. So these are just some examples. That's what an action alert looks like. The one on the left is an international one. The one on the right is a domestic one. And then you'll see at the bottom, it'll always say, click here to contact a member of Congress. And then this is a statement. We also issue statements, and I didn't mention that. When almost the crest of the violence against members of the Asian American community, we issued a very strong statement decrying that type of racism. These are what the sign-on letters look like. Now, one of the interesting pieces, I talk about our economical interfaith relationships, but a lot of our sign-on letters are with our coalition partners. There are so many that come through, we don't have to really initiate a lot of sign-on letters, but we do sign-on letters now. The state clerk, the advocacy offices are the only 2 program areas in the national office that can sign on in the name of the denomination. So I don't have to get anyone's permission. I can sign on as the Presbyterian Church USA, or I can sign on for the Office of Public Witness or for the UN office. No other program area can do this. So the state clerk oftentimes will do that. But and I usually don't sign on as a PCUSA unless it rises to that level. Like if all the other denominations, but when it's the offices that are signing on, we sign on in the name of the office. But we do have the authority to sign on in the name of the denomination. This is another statement. So issues of faith and politics, and this is where I talk to members of congregations about primarily, because one of the questions that we have to deal with, primarily with laity, is aren't you bringing politics into the church? And that's widespread throughout the American Christian church, not just in the Presbyterian church, but especially in other denominations. I think it's even stronger. And I will say that there is a racial divide here. In the Black church, there's never been a question about bringing politics into the church. The Black church has always been very political, especially with voting rights, during the Jim Crow era. The civil rights movement was led by clergy. All the meetings were held in churches. So that's been a part of the legacy. Now, I will say that there is a move. Well, I will say there's some infiltration of prosperity ministry in the Black church, where the prophetic voice is not what it used to be, and especially with some of our clergy who are homophobic, who don't support the LGBTQ AI plus movement. And so, but the white church is generally more conservative. I think Presbyterian churches are generally more moderate and conservative, wherein we'll have very progressive churches and we'll have very conservative churches. But a lot of our churches are very moderate, wherein they support social justice issues, but they're very concerned about keeping peace in the church. Don't want to bring any type of controversy in the life of the church. Don't want members to get upset. And grandma is coming to this church and she gets upset when people start talking about social justice. And there's some even stigma with the term social justice, where people, as soon as you say that, they turn you off. And so we say advocacy. And we don't do lobbying, but the difference between lobbying and advocacy is non-existent. They're the same thing, to be honest with you. But we do advocacy from a spiritual perspective, but we still try to influence legislation, which is what lobbying is. We try to influence legislators. We meet with them on specific issues and talk about it, but again, within the confines of the Johnson Amendment. So, getting back to these Bibles, these are two Justice Bibles that I really encourage members who are interested in justice issues to get. And the green one is the newest one, and that's the one whenever we have fellows or yabs, we always give them a copy of this Bible when they leave the office. It's a Justice Study Bible. You know how it is, this column right down the middle. You have the scripture on the left, and then on the right, you have some study guidelines, things to look out for. Only on justice issues. That's what the whole purpose of the Bible is for. I think this one was 2016. The brown one, the Poverty and Justice Bible, is the older one. And you know how in the King James Red Letter Version, how the words of Jesus are in red, all of the justice verses are in, I think it's in red as well throughout that Bible. So that's not a study Bible, but these are two references because I want to connect with Presbyterians, justice and scripture. That everything that we're doing is from a faith perspective. That we're not just doing this to be political. We're not just doing this to be an activist, but that it is our faith that is compelling us, because we know in the Reformed tradition, I love the way that we say, well, we don't really know a lot about God. God is mysterious. We're not going to be arrogant and say that we understand God. But the two things we know, God is a God of love and God is a God of justice. And they go hand in hand. That you can't proclaim to be a church of justice if you don't love folk. You can't proclaim to be a church of love if you don't proclaim justice. And so one of the things I really want, especially when I meet with congregations, to talk about how this is from a faith perspective, that we're doing this because this is what God calls us to do, to care about people, to try to transform society, to make a difference in the world, to reflect the kingdom of God. And so we really want to, and even talk about what does it mean. I said something sort of about separation of church and state. Does it really mean what you think it means? It does not mean you cannot have an engagement, political engagement. It does not mean you can't meet with your members of Congress. And again, when you look at the Bible, justice dominates, especially the Old Testament. And you look at the book of Exodus as a whole, it's a book of justice. God heard the cry of the oppressed. God sent Moses to set the people free. And then when you get to the prophets, from the beginning to the end, that's all they deal with is justice, or justice issues. And especially the thing that I don't think we proclaim enough, justice that God is calling the prophets to proclaim is not just justice for individuals, but justice towards nations. There's guidance for leadership. You hear William Barber say a lot of times, Isaiah 10:1, woe to legislators who make unjust laws. And so the Bible, we do not see that disconnect, is actually the opposite. And we don't have a problem with the Johnson Amendment, the guidelines of the Johnson Amendment. As a matter of fact, when Lyndon B. Johnson in the 60s, when he was a senator from Texas, he says, well, I'm going to punish the evangelicals, because they didn't vote for him when he ran for Congress. So he came up with the Johnson Amendment and said, these are the things that nonprofits can do, these are the things they can't do. Basically, two things you can't do: you can't receive money, you can't give money to a campaign, you can't endorse a candidate. But other than that, you can participate. And the denomination said, this is great. You know, we know what the rules are now. And all the denominations, even when President Trump came in, he said that he was going to move us away from the Johnson Amendment, especially, you know, the IRS, because the threat is the IRS will take away your tax exempt status. And most denominations was, no, we do not want the Johnson Amendment rolled back, because we think it offers us safe guidelines in the rules of fair. So I'm going to go very quickly through the scripture part, but again, 3 things about Jesus. What are the 3 things that Jesus did in his ministry? Preaching, teaching, and healing. All 3 synoptic gospels agree. All of them say the same thing. Matter of fact, this one a little Bible study. We know what was the first gospel written? Mark. I love when people say Matthew is the first one in the Bible. No, it's Mark. And we know that Mark, right, that's right, good job. We know that Matthew and Luke use Mark as our text when they read. So when Matthew read Mark, he noticed that in Mark chapter 1, that Mark identified those 3 issues. In Mark 1, I think it's 1:14, 21, what's the other one? 34. Jesus went around preaching, teaching, and healing. So what Matthew did, which is fascinating to me, he summarized the ministry of Jesus twice. He's the only one who does. He wrote the same verse twice, in Matthew 4:23 and 9:35. And the only difference between those 2 verses is the location. One says throughout all of Galilee, the other one says in all the towns and cities. Now, this is my point in bringing that up and talking about the relationship between justice and faith, is that every denomination does teaching. There's no denomination that doesn't do Christian education. We're all in agreement about that. Every denomination does preaching. The only thing we disagree on is when. The Seventh-day Adventists say on Saturday, the rest of us say, well, we kind of shifted the Sabbath a little bit to the Sunday because of the resurrection, but we still do the preaching. It's in a healing aspect that I think that we really need to challenge ourselves on. And again, you know where I'm going with this. We do well with charity, but we don't define advocacy as a part of the healing ministry of the church, which I think we should. Because Jesus talked about justice. And then here is the one where he said that I really identify, Matthew 23:23. He criticized the religious leaders for neglecting justice. He says, you do all the other stuff, you pay your tithes. He says, and these you should have done without neglecting the weightier matters of the law. And he began with justice. Justice was very important to Jesus. And he cared about people. As a matter of fact, you see Luke's version, a subtext of Luke's gospel is that it's the gospel of the poor. That Jesus is directly engaging with the poor, people who are impoverished. And I close with this. I love the way he took the Beatitudes from Matthew. Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit. What does Luke say? Blessed are the poor, period. That's it. Woe to you who are rich now. Woe to you who laugh now. So Luke has a special, he highlights the emphasis of Jesus caring about people who are impoverished, caring about people who suffer. So again, I say all of this to say we want to build that foundation, because I do think in the minds of many people that connection is not there. Again, you're bringing politics into the church. And there really needs to be a little re-education for folks. And well, let's talk about this. Let's see, and especially dealing with the teachings of Christ. How did Jesus engage with social justice issues? Did he engage with social justice issues? What did he say about justice, about poverty? And again, as Christians, we're going to disagree on the priority of the social justice issues. Some more conservatives might say abortion and sexual identity are more important. Progressives might say, living wage and healthcare are more important. But poverty is one we all have to agree on. There's no question that Jesus was concerned about the poor. Calvin. I love this quote from Calvin. He says, civil magistrates are called not only holy and legitimate, but by far the most sacred and honorable of human life. I didn't agree with that whole statement. I don't think it's the highest calling that you can have to be engaged in civic governance. But we know that Calvin saw no disconnect between being engaged in civic society. He did not. He was very engaged. In fact, he would write authorities and rules to try to influence them to go a certain way. And so our whole history is one where we have a history of engagement in trying to make it a better world. So I want to speed up. Now, these are resources. Are you familiar with these resources? These are the social policy statements released by our denomination. That's right, there are over 150 of them total. Almost any issue, we have a statement on. And I say these to say that if you want to address or study an issue, we probably have a paper written on it. Some of them are study guides. If you type in PCUSA and social witness policy statements, the page will come up and it's by topics. Now you won't see these pretty pictures. I did this so you can see what they look like. You'll just see a typed out line. And these are oppositions. I met once with Governor Jim Hunt when he was he was governor of North Carolina, and I was with the people of Faith Against the Death Penalty. And Hunt was Presbyterian, and that's why they called me and said, well, we got a Presbyterian pastor with us. He might be a bit. But Hunt was pro-capital punishment and a man of faith. And so what I took him were our capital punishment statements and gave him copies of them. And so we have a lot of information on almost every issue. And I'll say this last thing, they are very well done. The Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy writes them, and they start out with the history of the church. They start out with the Bible. How does the Bible inform us on this issue? Then they move on to church history throughout Christendom. What has the Christian churches said about this? For example, capital punishment. And then it moves to the rationale, the position of the church, and then it defends it, and then it comes out with some recommendations to you. So these are good study guides. And the first two are the last ones that we wrote on Christian nationalism and patriotism. We wrote those within the last 2 years. The one going on that first line all the way to the right, the red one, and the one with the flag on both rights. They're very good. These are a little dated, but I lift every voice, the one with the flag. I think it's excellent. It talks about, in the end, what are some things we need to strive for, automatic voter registration. It talks about voter ID. And again, this was before all of the hoopla over voter ID. So these are wonderful resources. And then the one to the left of the red one is probably the most popular one. Gospel values and gun violence. That's a lot of congregations have studied that one, and especially our young people have utilized that because we know that gun violence is an issue that they have been addressing. These are all of you get our news service. If you do not get them, I would strongly encourage you to sign up for, again, just go PCUSA, PMA, newsletter, and then you have a box, type an email in, and they'll start sending you these. You have access to anything that we produce, Presbyterian News and Presbyterian Survey. All the articles are online. Now, I'm telling you this because they want you to get a subscription, so do not tell them that I told you that the articles are free online once about a month passes. But you can access anything that we write. And the news, the first one, the daily news briefing, they come out every other day, and they have a series of articles about what's going on in the life of the church. They're not just dealing with social justice advocacy, or different areas of the church with different congregations. So I would really encourage Presbyterians, the way to keep up, especially as General Assembly is coming about in June. A lot of information comes out, and a lot of it comes through our communications department. And these are the periodicals, Presbyterians Today, the Presbyterian Outlook, and then Unbound is only online, and it focuses only on social justice issues. And they're going to move into our office. They were located in Louisville, but Lee Cato moved to DC, so that they will also be located in our office. And there is some conversation about merging them with our office and see how it deals with social justice issues. All right, Matthew 25. Everyone knows about Matthew 25. The 3 things are building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, and eradicating systemic poverty. And this presbytery is a Matthew 25 presbytery? Yes, ma'am. Praise the Lord. Yay. And so, again, all it takes is
this is a Matthew 25 conference center.
Boy, y'all are rolling. And really, you are further along, than some of our presbyteries. And, of course, for a congregation to become a Matthew 25, it just takes a voter session. And the thing that's really good about it is that you don't really have to do anything new. Every church builds by congregational vitality. There's something that you're doing in the life of your church. And so all you have to do is affirm that you're working on one of these 3 areas. And the issue of eliminating systemic racism is a major issue in our congregations. Everywhere I go, we talk about racism, do workshops on it. And so it's really it's a vibrant issue in the life of the Christian church. Spirituality, advocacy. And so what is advocacy? It's basically the organized effort, and I highlighted the things I thought were important, and influencing public attitudes, policies, and laws to create a more socially just society, vision of human rights, socioeconomic inequities, social rights, racial identity. I got this from Penn State, and I pulled it out because of that last word in the statement. This was for a state university, and they also said spirituality is a part of advocacy. They're the only one that I've seen, because everyone has a statement on advocacy, but this is the only one that I've seen that comes from basically a secular institution saying that spirituality is a part of advocacy as well. These are two newspapers that I recommend if you want to keep up with what's going on in DC. They're both free, and you get, and Roll Call is the one I really like. I really like Roll Call a lot. They send out, as soon as something happens in DC, 10, 15 minutes later, there's an article. And you can sign up for getting their statements, their articles in the morning, but Roll Call is really good. The Hill is good too. Not everyone likes the Hill as much, but I would recommend two of these, because they focus primarily on what's going on in the Hill, with the White House, the State Department, and the Supreme Court. So if you really want to get a balanced article, I would subscribe. And again, free subscriptions to both. So as we look at advocacy, the question is obviously, how can we do it in a digital age? Zoom, I think, has been a godsend. I was traveling pre-COVID half of the year. I was on the road somewhere. I would be in the office for 6 months and then out, especially after Christmas, and then once school started back in the fall, around October, November. And so I was going to a lot of places, but we generally ask for presbyteries in particular to foot the bill, room and board, flight, travel. We don't charge for anything that we do. So whenever I preach, even when I preach in a congregation, if they want to give a donation, they write it out to the Office of Public Witness. But Zoom has been a godsend. I mean, it really has given us a lot more access. So if you want to set up a webinar with us, set up a conversation with us, just let us know, because we are always available. And we Monday through Friday. Now, I do things on the weekend or Saturdays. But if people give me a choice, I say, well, Wednesdays are really good days. I don't have a lot of Wednesdays. But you can use Facebook. Is really, Facebook's getting a lot of criticism, but Facebook is one of the primary tools that advocates use. Facebook has a lot of tools, and when you look at that social good, AFB social good, that's a page that you can set up to do non-profit fundraising. All of the money goes to whatever you designate to. Facebook doesn't keep any of the money. So there are a lot of tools within Facebook, and people also they're talking about the death of Facebook. The younger adults are talking about the death of Facebook. Older adults are saying Facebook's okay. But Facebook is really a good resource, and we get most of our hits on Facebook, emails, obviously, Twitter, some. But Zoom, I think, probably is the one tool that everybody's using right now. Most of our meetings with members of Congress are on Zoom. There are no more meetings because everyone now has access. You don't have to go to DC anymore to meet with your member of Congress, or wait till they come back home. And so I've also noticed there are very few meetings directly with members of Congress. Most of them are with staff now, because the request is so strong. They just can't do all of it. But it's all about personal relationships, especially with the staff. And don't dismay if you have to meet with staff, because the staff are the ones who do all the work. The staff are the ones, when they come in with a notepad. They take notes. Member of Congress come in, Christian and I once went to a meeting with a member of Congress, and she had just gotten, she said, well, am I expected to say anything? I said, no, he's gonna do all the talking. You don't have to. And they give you about 20 minutes. So take advantage of meetings with staff, because they can be very beneficial. And the staff are the ones who let them know how our constituents feel. And this is of vital importance. Constituency. They want to know that you're a constituent. They want to know how many votes you represent. So whenever we meet, we try to set up a meeting with someone we don't have a relationship with. Are you from our state? Are you from our district? And how many Presbyterians voted for me? I mean, it was really kind of interesting, especially with the House. You know, the House, every 2 years, they're up for re-election. So as soon as 6 months after re-election, they're back in campaign mode again. And so we have to take advantage of all of the opportunities we have. 26 Presbyterians in Congress, no, 24. Used to be 31, 116th Congress, 117th is 24. 12 in the House, 12 in the Senate. Now, one is a PCA, but most of them are PCUSA. Mostly Republican. I think about 6 Democrats. Delaware's 2 senators are both Presbyterian Democrats. Chris Coons and what's his name? Senator from Delaware. Well, he's a little grumpy. But we do have a presence in Congress. Now, I will say this: it does not carry the weight that it used to. They, you know, just because we say the office of public witness, okay, nice. What do you want? You know, so they will talk about faith a lot, but I don't think they are listening to the faith community to the degree they once used to. I think they really, but I will say we do have a presence in DC. And I took out my ecumenical page, but our strongest partnerships are with other denominations in DC. You know, locally, oftentimes clergy don't work well together across denominational lines. In DC, we work very well together. We have an organization called WISC, well, the worst acronym, WISC, Washington Interstaff Religious Community. Okay, the other one, see, worse, is called HOWO, H-O-W-O. It's the heads of Washington office, but we won't even go into that. But I love these organizations. Again, a lot of our work, especially with sign-on letters, rallies, press conferences, are done in collaboration. And again, numbers count. So DC is a wonderful place to get that type of work done. Say something to me when we get about 10.
You're right there.
Oh, I'm gonna go real fast. Oh, this is it right here. Ecumenical Advocacy Days. This is our signature event. Who's been to EAD? What's EAD? Okay, that was not the smartest question I've ever asked. Okay, very quickly, since I don't have a lot of time. It's 2 events in one. In the past, before COVID, it would start on Friday and on Sunday. Friday night was staff training day, only Presbyterians. We will be at New York Avenue Presbyterian Church for a full day of training from about 9 to about 5 that afternoon. Then you would go over to the DoubleTree over near the Pentagon, and you would have EAD starting Friday evening and go until Monday afternoon. And it's a much larger event where there will be up to 800 people coming from across the country, interfaith, but mostly Christians, to talk about social justice, what's been going on in workshops all day. And so last year and this year, it's always in April. So if you get on our distribution list, you'll get the emails about it. It's online. I think it's something like $25. It might have went up at $50, but it's over 3 days. And so you can sign up for the workshops, you get all the information. It's a wonderful event. We always have national speakers there. I think probably in 2022, 2023, we'll go to in-person again. But it's a very powerful event that we do. And this is our signature event that we do. It's with Compassion, Peace, and Justice, all of our program areas, but we really take the lead on ecumenical advocacy days. And then these are resources online, PCUSA. There's a whole long page of resources dealing with gun violence at the PCUSA page. This one deals with racial justice resources. Again, a whole line of pages. You see the outline on the right of resources dealing with issues of racial justice. We also have the UN Commission on the Status of Women. You attended. What's the status of women?
Commission on the Status of Women in
Yes.
United Nations is advocating for women and girls' human rights.
Exactly, advocating for women and girls and human rights. Happens every year in March.
It's usually late February or.
Late February or March. So you can attend, both are online again in 2022. A wonderful resource. And Presbyterians constitute a large constituency of who attend Status on Women, and also EAD. We always have the largest denominational representation for EAD. And Presbyterians are very engaged in advocacy. But these are other resources that we have. And then that's it. Okay, we have about 8 minutes. Okay, so any questions about anything that I've said? But again, plant those seeds in your congregation and talk about it. Again, I think you want to make sure that you're encouraging your folk, be consistent. Be consistent. Don't push too hard, because you can tell when you're the pastor of the church or member of the church, okay, we might need to step back a little bit. Because you want to have a holistic life in church. You don't just want to be a one-topic church, and make sure that people are getting spiritually fed. There's a rich Bible study, rich preaching and teaching, Christian ed, but also social justice advocacy. It's got to be under that umbrella of things that you talk about in the life of your church. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
When you ask for a social advocacy letter, petition, and suggest personalize it, does the office ever see what has been done with those and have any desire to feedback, say, I wish you would do it slightly differently? Or?
That's a good question. When it comes to our sign-on letters, do we ever get feedback from the response of what people wrote and then how many? We will know how many clicked on and responded. We don't necessarily look at all of any of the responses that people send, but that is a good area of sensitivity, because if someone sends it, well, it's going to be in their name, won't be in our name, actually. But no, we don't really follow what people state. Was that your question?
Yeah, question and I guess wish for some feedback.
Yeah. I will say in our defense, we're a small staff. We have 4, we used to be as many as 9. But we've gotten down for budget cuts, downsize and things like that. Yes.
Can you describe the difference between advocacy and how it looks as an individual or as the church, like the body of the church, what the difference looks like?
Yeah, what the difference looks like in advocacy, whether it's an individual or through the institution of the church. Yeah, individual advocacy is usually very individual, personally driven, where a lot of times you will see at times institutions will arise out of an individual's advocacy, like Moms Against Drunk Driving. We know that the founder, was her son or daughter was killed by a drunk driver. And so that has gone to a nationwide movement. Now, in fact, many of the movements started with individuals, but I think eventually you're going to have to move to coalition work. And eventually you're going to have to move to where you have other partners. And so the work of the church in advocacy, oftentimes we will partner with a nonprofit or with, like, Great for the World. All their lobbying, letter writings, dealing with issues of hunger. So that's, I think, part of where a lot of Presbyterians are engaged with Great for the World. Even more so, I think, than our office, because everywhere I go, people say, well, I've been doing great for the last 30 years. But when you look at institutions, there are more resources, there's more expertise, but there's also more work, because oftentimes when they deal with one subject, then they deal with all the underground layers as well. I think with individuals, many individuals are driven by their faith. I think a lot of people are, like in the More Money movement in North Carolina, it was a faith-based movement, and many people were there out of a faith commitment. So I think it's more individualized, lack of a better word, dealing with individuals. Yes.
Going along with that, I'm wondering though about encouraging people to act individually, though. That's the thing. I think very often in our churches they're like, well, I'm just one person, what difference does that make? But it does make a difference. And I think, I'm wondering if that was anything wrapped in that question as well.
It was a Zoom question,
This
so
was a
I don't
question.
know.
Okay, about being individual and being corporate. So I mean, as you said, with the corporate, we can have bigger sort of things, but it's still important that the individual does something.
Yes, it's very important that the individual does something. And again, many movements started with an individual, where a person was very passionate about something. And when you're passionate about something, it means you're not going to give up on it. Yeah, so you're absolutely right.
I would say as an individual and one who's moved around quite a bit, the groundwork that organizations do, like making it so simple, like click here so you know who your representative is, I mean, around here, like on the local and state level, it's really confusing. So to have people who do that groundwork and are well versed in that is really helpful. And, you know, the form letters are nice. But I've been in some local groups who are like, okay, this is what you can do. You can write postcards, and we're going to pick a day and we're going to do it together. And I think that's the piece that churches can do, to say, you know, we care about this issue out of our faith, and we want to give you the tools to make it easy. We can all write letters, you know,
Yes.
but here's where you start. And I think that's a simple step.
Yeah, one of the churches I served would call that an offering of letters.
An offering of
An
letters.
offering of letters, and they would do it like after church, you know, on a Sunday, they would, but that's when they would all gather and do that.
Okay.
I just wanted to emphasize, I've had the opportunity to travel around a lot in the United States with Presbyterian women, and there are so many congregations that don't realize the presence that we have in the international stage, as well as the advocacy days opportunity. And it made me think about a conversation I had at lunch with some folks. I continually hear, how do we get our younger people engaged and involved? And the advocacy is a huge opportunity, as well as the Commission on the Status of Women. I've seen so many people come to the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN who had an individual passion, and they learned so much. Same thing with advocacy days, and they've taken it back to their congregations and their communities. So these are wonderful opportunities. The young people really are involved and want to be engaged in social justice, and these are two wonderful opportunities. And just to reiterate on that international stage, the PCUSA has NGO status with ECOSOC. Presbyterian women also have NGO status with ECOSOC. So we have, I feel like, a really strong presence on the national and international levels.
And much of what we do is influenced by what's going on with our overseas partners. There are times like when the protest started in Cuba, Presbyterians started writing to the office saying, when is the church going to issue a statement? And we did issue a statement because our partners on the ground said, don't issue a statement. It's only going to make it worse. So there are times in certain countries where if we speak from the safety of America, it will endanger lives overseas. We have to be very careful. But to reiterate your point as well, individuals can make a tremendous difference. I mean, it's amazing. As a matter of fact, when you look at, again, most of the movements that were started by individuals. And every voice counts. There's just no question about that. And especially, I think, in congregation, when you have been a part of the life of a church, and you've been faithful in that church, you've been going to that church for years, and you speak out on issues, people listen because they respect you. And they respect, even they might disagree with you, but they will listen to you. But you know how it is when someone just joined the church only 10 years ago, you know, and they haven't been here long, they don't know what you're talking about. But your voice matters. Your voice matters, and you can make a difference.
It's 2:00.
Okay, thank you for your attention, and I've enjoyed being with you. It's wonderful.
We have a break until 2:15.